Now, frequently we would find the word diagnosis partnered with iridology, but this is not the kind of diagnosis that you might be familiar with from the medical perspective. When you go to see your GP, for example, you present a set of symptoms and they decide what probable illness you have. We're not quite doing that in iridology. We do not diagnose specific illnesses, or not generally speaking. So we would refer to iridology more as a diagnostic tool, and it goes alongside other diagnostic tools that we might use in naturopathy, for example, tongue and pulse analysis. Now, before we get started, of course, that word iris needs to be explained a little bit. It's, of course, we're referring to the iris of the human eye, the coloured portion. Probably it's a big identifier of individuality, as you probably know. If you think of somebody, you think, okay, what colour are their eyes? That's going to be a kind of defining factor that you would think about in them if you're observant. So such and such has blonde hair and blue eyes, such and such has dark hair and brown eyes, and so forth. Now, the plural of iris is irides. Now, we've spelt it out for you phonetically there so that you can practice that and get it right, but also so that when I use that term, irides, you know that I'm referring to both the irides, not just one iris. Now, iridology is a resolutely naturopathic modality. It's used extensively by naturopaths around the world, particularly in the UK, in Europe, in America, very much so, and also in Australia too. These are the kind of centres of excellence of iridology right now. I'm not saying that that's not true of anywhere else in the world. I know that it's very widespread throughout the world because the book that I mentioned on the last slide, my book Practical Iridology, has actually been translated into 12 foreign languages, including Arabic, Japanese, and Russian. So it is widely known. It's not necessarily that popular with the medical profession, although it's important to state that many doctors have been involved in the development of iridology. In fact, some of the most important developments have taken place in the context of a kind of a medical approach. And you're going to notice as we go through that there's a lot of medical language here too. Now, a very important concept here is terrain. So you see bullet point 3 there, that iridology, or the iris, or the irides, can reveal the terrain, the tissue status, possible levels of intoxication and dysfunction when things don't work so well. I guess you already know where that word comes from. If you've had the history of naturopathy already, you will know, for example, that in the turn of the 20th century, 19th to 20th century, a couple of researchers in medical terms, Louis Pasteur and Robert Koch, came up with something called germ theory. This was basically the theory that microbes, germs, bacteria, viruses, etc., cause disease. And it has been the dominant paradigm, if you like, in medicine since then. But at the same time, remember, there are a couple of other guys out there, Antoine Béchamp and Claude Bernard, who are developing an alternative theory. And this was actually called terrain theory. And the idea here was that the tissue status, the state of the terrain, in terms of, sometimes called the soil actually as well, that the pathogen falls upon, your tissues, is more important than the nature of the pathogen itself. So very simply, when we look at the eyes, we are seeing a map of the terrain of your body. What are its weaknesses? What are its risk factors? Where are things likely to get stuck, for example, so that energy and vitality and even body fluids don't move so well, and things can build up that we know will disrupt our health. That's the idea of looking at the iris in that way, is that it reveals the state of tissues that we have to contend with when we're actually helping you or helping patients to retrieve or regain optimal health. And this is based on another idea which I want to introduce at this stage, a very, very important idea in iridology, and that is constitution. What we're going to be talking about mostly in these 6 lectures is looking at the iris as an indicator of your individual genetically inherited or familial constitution. So a lot of it, obviously, most of it probably derived from your family history, So one of the things that we'll be doing as Iridology is looking at the iris in terms of what it can tell us specifically about that family history. And many of the questions that we ask when we're giving an iris examination are things like, is there any cardiac problems in your, or are there any cardiac problems in your family, for example? Not do you have diabetes, but perhaps a relative or a forebear of yours may have had diabetes. These are things we can pick up. Now, that doesn't mean to say that you're going to be ill with those things. What it means is that that is a kind of a little weakness that may have to be navigated or worked around or improved upon in treating you. So individualized, natal disposition, what you're born with. But of course, also taking on board the fact that whatever you're born with will develop and change over life as well. And we'll be getting into that in a lot more detail as we go through.